In the early 2000s, when American forces first began fighting what would become a 20-year war on terror, there was little understanding of the causes or long-term impact of traumatic brain injuries. For many dedicated warriors, it was these invisible wounds that would become haunting and painful reminders of their time on the battlefield. Greg Coker, a retired U.S. Army Special Forces aviator, was shot down in 2004 while serving in Iraq. Among the wounds he sustained, a lingering traumatic brain injury.
My first symptoms, I had a headache. I'd never had a migraine, but I had my head pounded for 9 months, constantly, nonstop.
Despite seeing several specialists, no one could identify the treatment Coker needed or even pinpoint the brain injury. So after his physical wounds healed, he went on to serve 5 more combat deployments, unknowingly exposing his brain to even more trauma.
It's overpressure from, incoming enemy fire, just blast from door breaches and charges.
It wasn't until after Coker retired in 2007 that he truly began experiencing symptoms from multiple injuries to his brain.
I would just forget things. So I would have to use my sticky notes, or I carried a tape recorder with me, actually, so I just had problems recalling.
Coker admits this took him to a pretty dark place mentally before choosing to seek help. Fortunately, he found state-of-the-art treatment which provided an explanation of his long-term symptoms and even helped to reverse some of the damage. That's not the norm, however, as recent data shows less than half of the veterans suffering this injury's lasting effects will actually seek help. And those sustaining a brain injury after serving in Iraq and Afghanistan are twice as likely to consider suicide. The Pentagon realized it had a growing problem and began to take action.
We had a lot of good work being done in these various areas throughout a very large Department of Defense.
Over the last 20 years, huge strides have been made in researching and treating traumatic brain injuries. Now comes a new plan to build on that momentum with a single comprehensive strategy known as the Warfighter Brain Health Initiative.
This called for, let's all get on the same page and synergize our efforts and coordinate it tightly so we could accelerate findings and help warfighters in a quicker way.
One of the first steps of the 5-part plan will be to identify the baseline brain health of all service members, which can then be monitored throughout their career.
The military works all in protocols and standards, right? So if we have an every 5-year time period that you have to get your cognition checked, that's the standard. Everybody gets it. It doesn't matter if you were deployed, if you were a cook, if you were support logistics staff, you're going to get your cognition looked at. So that takes away some of the stigma about why me? Why do I have to go? Does somebody think there's something wrong with me? And we find that there's better compliance that way.
Policies will also be developed to prevent, identify, and treat brain damage caused in training as well as combat.
Some of the technology that's part of this program as well, like putting blast sensors on and looking at how much blast energy goes to the body. People, warfighters, are already making changes when they are out in the field conducting field activities because they see the numbers and they say, whoa, that's a little high, I need to stand back more. Or maybe we really need 3 people here and not 4 people here.
Some of the Pentagon's progress in this area comes from research into chronic traumatic encephalopathy, or CTE, the brain disease associated with many NFL players.
With these repetitive insults over time, the disease can be triggered and then it can progress all the way to dementia and death at the end stage of the disease.
Veterans have also been diagnosed with this serious neurodegenerative disease, which currently can only be found post-mortem.
This plan also puts all that under one roof so that as we get findings, we can try to do something much earlier than finding it when somebody's passed away and you look at their brain tissue.
For years, veterans like Coker have been advocating for this kind of support from the top. And while he says it's long overdue, he believes these new policies could save lives.
You can't control enemy incoming weapon systems or whatever the case, but we sure can, we sure can put in safety standards and things like that to ensure that everybody's safe.
The military has 6 to 48 months to implement the 53 action steps detailed in the Warfighter Brain Health Initiative, although completing some aspects of the plan could take much longer. For example, obtaining brain assessments of all personnel, new recruits, active duty, National Guard, and reserves could take about 5 years. A long undertaking expected to pay off in the time and investment. Caitlin Burke, CBN News, Washington.